You are now listening to Talk Your Jits podcast.
Welcome back to the Talk Your Jits podcast. This podcast is, as the name implies, all about Jiu Jitsu. I am your host, Lamar Smith, and today's guest is a third-degree black belt who owns Conners Martial Arts Academy, located in Norwood, Massachusetts. Ladies and gentlemen, John Conners.
Hi, Lamar.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Very good, thanks. Thank you for having me on your show.
Man, the pleasure is all mine. But first and foremost, man, I would like to, show my appreciation by thanking you for being a guest on today. Appreciate it very, very much.
My
right,
pleasure.
Man, no problem. Without further ado, man, if you want to formally introduce yourself again, by all means, and let's hear about your jiu-jitsu journey.
Sure. I started my training in January of 1999. So I started essentially right before my 36th birthday.
Okay.
And here in the Boston area. So, I had watched the UFC and so forth. And I was a business person. I owned a business at the time. I was a parent of 2 young kids. So I was living that kind of pedestrian life, being a husband and father and going to work. And I would work out. I would do a little bench pressing, a little jogging, all that type of stuff that was getting insanely boring to me. And I just found myself at a point in my life where I could do something for myself, so to speak. And I had always wanted to train in the martial arts. I was an athlete as a younger person, and I did a little bit of training when I was 14 for about 6 months in a karate program here in Boston that was actually pretty advanced for its time. I think it was pretty hardcore. We did a lot of hard sparring. So it was really cool place, but I just didn't have room for it in my life at that time. And then finally at age 36, I had some time and I opened up the Yellow Pages. So for you younger people, the Yellow Pages is this big book that had all businesses in it before Google and everything. And I opened it up. I went to the martial arts pages, and I had known about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because of the UFC, of course, because of Royce Gracie and all his great success. And I thought, man, that seems like the most exciting martial art that I could take. And I found a place called Boston Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that was in Watertown, Mass at the time. And I called over there, made an appointment, and went over there as soon as I could and stepped on the mat. And I felt like I had come home immediately. So it was one of those things it was just for me right off the bat. I just loved it.
Man, that's awesome. So what was it about it for you that drew you to jiu-jitsu?
Well, I think what happened for me was I had been living that kind of boring life. I had a button-down shirt and tie and khakis and a little bit of a poochy belly. And I just felt like I wasn't myself anymore. You know what I mean? And people were looking at me like I was just this boring middle-aged guy. And I'm thinking, there's really, in the best way, in the best sense, there's a savage inside here. I just got to get back in touch with it. And jiu-jitsu helped me do that, where I could do something that was hard, something that was physical, challenging, and I could work with a lot of other people who were excited about what they were doing and willing to work hard and suffer a little bit in the best way, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So it was just the thing for me. I just loved it. And back then it was under the radar. It wasn't quite as popular, obviously, it is today. So that everybody that was involved in it, they were really what I would call amateurs in the truest sense of the word amateur. So when you look at the etymology of the word amateur, it means somebody who loves what they're doing. You know what I mean? So everybody just loved what they were doing. We would drive. I think I drove like 40 minutes to my training, which was no problem for me. It was just great, and I just tried to train as often as I could, and I just loved everything about it.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. Like when I first stepped on the mats, it was like it was a rush of something new, and it was just like I think this is what I need, and just been sticking with it like ever since.
That's it, man. That's the thing, to just keep staying with it. And so now I'm 60 years old, and I just trained this morning, and I just love it. It's it's such a big part of my life. I work with my son full time, so it's our vocation, so to speak, and it's our hobby, it's our sport, and it's where we are surrounded by our friends and people that we respect and admire. So for me,
Mhm.
it hits everything. It hits family, friends, business, everything, all in one. It's like a big um, overlap for me, and it's just great.
Right. So when did you open up your school?
So I opened up my academy in 2005, July of 2005.
Oh, okay. Wow. So you've been doing this for a minute.
Yeah, yeah. So we just passed 18 years, and
Wow. That's awesome.
yeah, it's great. And then for me, I had a rejuvenation of sorts. So my son was in college, and he was studying in a 5-year engineering program. I think it was like after the 4th year, he came to me and he said, "You know what? I just do not like any of this, and I'm dropping out of school," which was hard for him to do because he's a responsible person. But I
Hmm.
was totally behind him with that. I'm like, well, if you don't like doing it, it doesn't make any sense to study it for another year, then commit your life to it. I mean, that's not
Right.
helping. So he left that program, and then he had worked some lousy jobs, and and he was trying to find his own way. And I went to him and I said, "Hey, what are they paying you at this lousy job? Would you be interested if I paid you the same amount if you came and worked with me?" And he said, "Yeah, I think I'll do that." And then he came in probably at age 21 or something, and he was maybe 22, but he was basically a white belt. He had trained a little bit as a kid, but not very seriously. So he came in then as a white belt, and he really devoted himself to jujitsu with like a monk-like consistency. And now he's at a super high level, and he teaches our classes with me, and he's really good at jujitsu, and he's one of my training partners, and I'm learning from him at this point, and we're learning from each other. So
Hmm.
it's just a great experience for us.
Yeah, I bet, man. I bet, especially when you get to train with your child. It's like you get to start over, so to speak. Doing
That's it.
this.
That's a good point, Lamar. And the other thing, which I don't know if you'll experience this when you get older, but when you get in your mid 50s and so forth, it's just natural that life starts to decline for you a little bit. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying it has to, but it's just natural where, your testosterone comes down, all of those hormones start to ebb away from you, and you just naturally lose your drive, and you naturally lose your competitiveness and so forth. And for me, my son coming in when he did was the perfect timing because it reinvigorated everything. And I have
Yeah.
so much respect for him that it gives me drive. And then I want to keep performing, and I want to keep improving myself and developing my skill. And it's very motivational for me to have him there. I suspect if he wasn't part of our academy, it would be easy for me to start to lay back and spar less, and still be an active coach, but maybe my personal skill development would stop and so forth, just in a natural way, and I would take more of a step backwards. But
Yeah.
luckily
Get
that's not
start getting
happening.
comfortable.
Yeah, you get comfortable, of course. It's not easy. You got to put a
Hmm.
lot of work in for jujitsu, and then when you get older, if you want to be at a healthy weight, there's no getting around the eating. You have to eat in the right way. I don't eat perfectly by any means, but I probably eat in a more healthy way than I would otherwise. I don't want
Right.
to, yeah, I want to represent myself as best as I can to my students, even physically. I want to look good for them so they can respect that, and be somewhat of a role model if I can for them.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree with that. I love that mentality because I think that way too, especially being in a position of an instructor. You want to have a certain air about yourself. You want to, I
Yeah,
guess, practice what you preach. You don't want to be
there you
like,
go.
yeah, I teach martial arts, or I teach this, and you can barely, walk up a flight of steps, without
Yeah.
being winded. So yeah, because I can tell, from like, you don't look like the average 60-year-old guy. Like I would,
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
you look, you look healthy, look in shape. And even at, even in my, I'm 36, and just seeing people my age look twice as older than I do.
Mm, mm.
And it's just like, man, what happened? Like I always ask, like, what happened? Obviously life happens and people just, go their direction they go. But to me personally, I can't see myself not being active.
I hear
You
you.
know,
When I started, I was your age. I was 36. And the funny
hmm
thing is at that time, that was 1999, people considered 36 as old,
yeah,
like guys like Tom Brady hadn't come on the scene, doing amazing things at 40 or early 40s. So people thought when you were 36, you're pretty much done. And
hmm
I don't think people feel that way now. Thank God, people feel like they can keep going, and I know you can, if you just have to do it in the right way, be intelligent about how you train, take care of
hmm
yourself, and all those things. But I feel personally that my jujitsu has gotten better in the last 4 years. So, and the way I know that is I can do things now that I could not do 5, 6 years ago. And I understand
wow,
jujitsu better than I did 5 or 6 years ago. So, it's possible that, this isn't, at some point, it's not going to keep going this way. But I feel at age 60 right now, I'm the best jujitsu version of myself. And I started at 36. But, at some point, it's, the wheels are going to come off and it's not going to be. But I know you can keep going if you do it the right way until 60 and keep improving at least your technical skill. And I think my performance is probably the best it's ever been, just because I understand what I'm doing so much more than I used to.
yeah. And this is just a prime example of like the people who I try to talk to, like the non-jujitsu people, and they will have conversations, and they'll ask me like, oh, what rank are you? And it's like, I'm a brown belt. And they say, oh, so what's next? I'm like, oh, well, black. Oh, so when you get, so you're done then? No. Like, no, like, this is just prime example of it, like, what you were just saying, how even, being a third-degree black belt, you've been training for a very long time, you're still teaching, you're still learning, you're still
Yeah,
growing in this,
yeah,
in this sport. And I tell people, like, like once you start jujitsu, once you get your black belt, yeah, that means you got a vast understanding of the martial art, but training doesn't stop.
correct. Yeah,
Like,
and
you get your
jujitsu is so vast, it goes so
yeah.
wide and so deep that
hmm
you can spend many, many decades studying it and still make improvements. And when I watched like an instructional from a guy like John Danaher, it's almost overwhelming how much information this guy has accumulated and codified and just arranged. It's just amazing. I'm like, how did he
hmm
figure all this out and organize it the way he has? It's just really impressive, because it seems like he's still making improvements and distinctions on what he's doing.
yeah.
And yeah, and I see that in general. Like when you watch ADCC, if you compare like the most recent event with maybe from 2017, so like 6 or 7 years ago, I think all the athletes are much more skilled today than they were even then. So
hmm
so that's the nature of the sport. It just keeps evolving, and who knows where it's going to go in the future. But there's always room for improvement, always room for you to develop more skill, get more insight into what you're doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I talk about this a lot on my show, and our our master Joe Moera, um, he's been training for God knows how long, since he was since he was young, and he's still we I keep in contact with him on social media. He's still training. He's still
That's
in the
amazing.
gym hard, and it's just like, man, he like is and he shows no signs of slowing down,
That's
no
awesome.
signs.
Something, so way back when I started in 1999, there were really no instructional videos that you could purchase. They didn't exist. There was a
Right.
myth there was like this whisper of Renzo Gracie and his business partner. They put together some instructionals, but you really couldn't buy them anywhere. So it was just so hard to find anything. So I used to buy all kinds of books. And there was a couple jiu-jitsu books, and I would buy judo books, and I would buy wrestling books. And I was just hungry for any information to help me improve what I was doing. But there was one guy, and his name escapes me right now, but he was a Joe Moreira student. And his name was like Michael something. And I think he was like a purple belt under Joe Moreira. So like in 2000, he put out these, what do you call VHS tapes of instructionals. And I used to buy them, and they were really good. And then he had Joe Moreira on there teaching as well. And Joe's English was like not terrific at the time. And, it's just not his native language, but this guy would sort of interpret for him. And Joe was amazing. So he had one video that I loved, which was all these collar chokes. So he could collar choke you from any position, any angle. It was so awesome. And I got so much out of those instructionals. And, so I've been a Joe Moreira fan ever since then. So for the last 23 years, and I use a lot of those chokes in the academy too. It was pretty cool. So I'm glad to hear that he's still doing his thing. That's great to hear.
Yeah, man, he's like an uncle, because that's my instructor's master. So like I said, we talk on on social media every so often, or like he'll post a video of him training or part of a seminar he did somewhere, and it's just like he has his system that we follow, and it's always evolving. I talk to so many people in our lineage, his black belts, and they're like, yeah, man, Joe added this, and I'm like, wait, when? Or like, he changed this to this, and we like, wait, what? Like, we're so, no matter how how much we try to catch up, he's still boom, 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 boom. And that's the type of things I love to see. Like, like even at that age, he's still evolving, still keeping his game fresh and evolving with what he can do currently versus when he was younger. He makes it works for him.
I can believe it, because I could see that he had a real love of the game, so to speak, a real love of jiu-jitsu. And the guys that have that's so powerful, because it creates this enthusiasm that just pushes you forward. It's amazing.
Yeah, and that's how I love about our system, love about just jiu-jitsu in general, man. It's just one of those things where you can evolve as much as you want, basically. Like if you want to be stagnant, you can be stagnant. If you want to push and be the next Nicky Rod or Gaval or whoever, you can do that.
Yeah.
You have those, you have those options. So I wanted to ask you, with you, being in the game as long as you have, like, how you were saying, like, there wasn't like a lot of resources when it came to like jiu-jitsu. So like, how has that been for you, seeing that, like, growing up, you're seeing you have to rent DVDs or whatever from somewhere, and all of a sudden now is one click of a button, you got 50 people teaching like 100 techniques?
I think it's really accelerated the learning curve for people. So I feel like in the last 4 years, with all the really high quality instructionals that have come out, that people are just getting better at jiu-jitsu at a faster pace. So the white belts in my academy are much better than I was as a white belt. And the blue belts, everybody is at a higher level. So if you go out to, my son and I, we go and compete at all the large IBJJF tournaments. And if you go to the Worlds and watch the blue belts, some of those guys that are such a high level, it's really impressive. And I don't think it was always that way. I think it's changed. I think in the last 4 years or so, and I would attribute the change not to, we have an expanding group of athletes that are participating in the sport, and we have guys coming over from wrestling. So you got guys who are, if you wrestle at a Division I level, you're a really high level grappler to begin with. You're just operating at different rules. So that is a big advantage. But I think the instructional, so you can have guys that start from a complete zero, no wrestling or anything, And because of that information, and if they apply themselves, they can progress very, very quickly. So my son, my son is trained. I'm trying to think how many years he's been consistently training now. I'm going to guess and say like over 7 years. And I would say he's technically ahead of me. So, and I've been training. This is my 25th year. So what I mean by technically ahead of me is he understands more technique. He can apply more technique. He just has more. He has grasp of more information than I do. I'm effective at what I do, and I'm good. I know a lot of stuff too, but he's just a little bit wider and a little bit deeper than me, and it's all because of those instructionals. He studies these instructionals probably an hour a day every day, and then we train twice a day. So he's just making pretty fast progress. But I think if you compete at all, you really have to make that type of progress, because if you're not, you're just going to fall behind,
Yeah. Competition, is we always talk about this. It's a whole different beast when it comes to jiu-jitsu, because it's like, it's a whole nother level, because you can only train as hard as you can with the people that you have, obviously.
Right.
And then you go out there and you going against someone that you never met. It's a whole level of, it's a different level of intensity.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
and I try to tell Lamar, I try to tell my students, like, how many people in the general population will train in a combat sport or martial art where they have live training, like judo or jiu-jitsu or Muay Thai kickboxing or boxing or wrestling, like something like that. That's a serious sport of jiu-jitsu or of a martial art. And it's a small percentage of the general population that will just even step on the mat. You know what I mean? So that's like probably 1% of the population will just do that. So then of that 1%, how many are actually competing on a regular basis? I bet it's only 10% of all of them. So when you go to compete, you're dealing with 1/10 of 1% of the general population. You know what I mean? So you're an elite group just going to compete anywhere. So whatever your results are, it's not going to be easy, I guess, is my point. And I always caution my guys, don't get discouraged if you don't get great results, because it's just not that easy,
Right.
And look at your competition as a means to help you develop your skills. That's our mantra at our academy, is it's all about skill development. So keep your eye on developing your skills. And of course, if you can go compete, if you can win, it's awesome. It's exciting. It's fun. You get a little bit of glory. It's just wonderful. But you can't expect to win all the time,
Right.
The average record of any competitor is 500. That's literally the average. So if you're 6-5, you're doing better than most. You know what I mean? So don't sweat it. I think we get sometimes, we see athletes and sports teams that are so successful, and maybe they're undefeated or they have way more wins than losses, and we start to think that's the measure of success, and it's just not realistic for the rest of us. There's always going to be outliers. We can't all be outliers.
Yeah, because I've done a couple tournaments, and I've taken my losses, and just like you said, you have to look beyond the numbers. Don't go in thinking, oh, I got a 0-2 or 0-3 record, blah 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 blah. Like, no, you're still among the elites, like you said, that got up and trained and bust your hump and went out there and competed. If your match lasted 1 second or whatever, you still went out there and did it.
That's right. And you know what? Just showing up and making weight and getting on the mat. I mean, a lot of people can't even do that. So there's something to be said. I'm not a guy who believes in participation ribbons and so forth, but just making it there, making weight. Like most people, when they go to a tournament, I find 90% of the value is going to be in your preparation. So maybe you prepare for 6 or 8 weeks or whatever it is. So now you bring a slightly sharper intensity to your training. So you're going to develop a little bit better. Maybe you eat a little bit better than you're used to eating. You don't have to be perfect with it, but what you're going to find is you're going to get most of the value of the competition in that training camp. And then when you go there, you're going to get some stuff out of that too. But, we try to de-emphasize the short-term results. And I think it's the best way to look at it. And we always learn something when we go to compete, So my son and I are the main coaches. So sometimes we just see, oh, wow, we saw 3 of our white belts were struggling to break the close guard. So then that tells us as an academy, as a team, we're not placing enough emphasis on that area. So we're going to change our curriculum a little bit, change the way we train so they won't struggle so much in that area. So it's informing us. I always tell the guys from our academy who go to compete, I always say I have respect for them and I have gratitude because they're going out to compete makes our whole academy better. Even the people who never compete, because we're getting crucial information that helps us direct our training and direct our curriculum so that we really stay on point. And, there's that cliche that you either win or you learn, which is a lot of truth to that. That's great. But we also find sometimes when we win, we do something that we sort of reveal a weakness that we have. And we're like, oh, wow. Like, I think the last tournament I was in, I had a competitor in a chest wrap position. And my son had taught this method to go behind from the chest wrap where you post on the armpit and you do an arm drag and you go behind. And I was in those classes, but I was coaching more and I wasn't drilling so much. So then when I was in that position, even though I won my match, I didn't perform that technique. And my son told me after the match, he goes, "You forgot to post and drag." I was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that. Wow." But then the next week in training, I got to that position and I did it in training. So now it's going to be part of my game. It's installed into my game. But it probably wouldn't have if I didn't go out there and compete. You know what I mean? Where the spotlight's on your game a little bit more. I think if you're only training in the academy, sometimes like some of the weaknesses in your game and your system can get hidden a little bit. But when you go under the spotlight of competing, whatever you need to fix is going to show itself. So that's part of the beauty of it.
Yeah. And I did like three competitions, and like I was like, okay, I wanted to just like the first time I was like, I just did it just to kind of just get the experience.
Right.
And then the second time I did it, I did both gi and no gi. And I was like, okay, I went out there, I did my best. I saw, like you said, a lot of stuff that I was proficient in, a lot of stuff that I the mistakes I made. And that just made me want to just go back to the gym and, work out, get, fix what happened. Because I was talking to my training partner and I did grappling industries the last time I did both gi and no gi. And he's like, how you feeling? I'm like, yeah, man, I'm good. I'm ready to go back. I'm ready to go to the gym. I'm ready. I'm ready to watch what happened, and work on fixing that. Like,
that's it, man. I tell you, Lamar, I love it when guys compete, win or lose, and they come back to the academy the next day for class. I just love that.
Yeah, man. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
That's my youngest.
That's wonderful. I'm happy for you.
Thank you. But yeah, man, that's how I look at jiu-jitsu. Like when I heard that philosophy, either you win or you learn. I took it to heart because it's like, I see a lot of improvements when I do lose, because it's like, okay, if I'm getting caught with the same stuff, this is what I need to work on. Mm-hmm. If I'm smoking everybody I meet, then it's kind of like, all right, we got it. You can handle yourself. But I love when I get a chance to really, really get in a situation where it's like, okay, I need to find my way out. I need to work on this, and this is what we're gonna drill to get better.
Mm-hmm.
So. That's
it,
how I mean.
man.
That's how I feel like you got to look at it. If you want to, especially if you want to survive in this, in this sport, everyone talks about like having an ego, which everyone has one, big or small. Everyone is going to show eventually, but you just got to suck that up and keep going.
Yeah, I often tell my students when they go to compete, I tell them, this really isn't a test of you as a person. This is a test of your jiu-jitsu training system. And we're going to see how good your training has been. And we're going to see, is there some flaw in the way we're training you? And then, if something happens where, like I said, maybe they have trouble breaking the close guard, or maybe they're getting swept when they stand up or something, and then we say, no problem. Now we can address that. So that's not your fault. That's the system's fault, the training system. And it's all about perfecting that system of development. And if you keep perfecting that system and you keep developing, man, wins are going to come your way. Like that's the one thing about jiu-jitsu is I don't believe there's much luck involved. There's not a lot of lucky punches. So if you keep developing your skills, you're going to get your share of wins for sure. That will come with the skill development. So, and then I find if somebody beats me in a match, that probably means they're better at jiu-jitsu than me and they deserve to win. So hats off to them. And then I just got to continue on my journey of skill development and improve my skills. And I'm actually not in a race with that other competitor. They're doing their thing and I'm doing my thing. And maybe I'll never catch up to them. And I'm okay with that. But what's important to me is I keep making some progress, keep developing my skills, keep going in the right direction.
Yeah. And that's even like, when I get a chance to cross train, it's like, I push, I test myself with what I know against what they know. And if I come out on top, okay, cool. But there's always going to be a lesson to be learned. Like our school is more, our school is more traditional, more, more of the martial arts self-defense aspect. The schools I visit are high level competition schools. So the pace is two different things. Like what we do in the whole class, they do in about 30 minutes. So it's like, boom, fast pace from bell to bell. And, it's just like, this is real. Like this is a whole different breed, a whole different pace. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
But if you approach that experience with the right mindset, you can get so much out of it. You know what I mean? Sometimes in that situation, I'll kind of lay back a little bit and let the other guy work and let him do his game, let him do his offense and just sort of observe it, see what he's doing and how he's making it work and not judge myself in it. And then you can learn so much when you approach it that way, not from a place where, I have to beat this guy right now. It's like, no, let's see what he's doing. Let's see what his game is. You know what I mean? Almost like reconnaissance. And when I approach it that way, there's not a lot of pressure. And then there's a great opportunity to learn some skills there.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree with that. Because, the guys I roll with, just by their movement, I was okay, this guy must be like white belt, blue belt-ish. So I'm just going to, just let him work and see what happens and, see how he moves and operate. And I was enjoying it. I was enjoying getting my butt kicked. I'm like, okay, this guy, knows a little something. He has his areas that he needs to be that needs to be fixed, but it was still a good role. So
nice.
Yeah. It was it's a Voyage. Is it Voyage Jiu-Jitsu? I think or is it Voyage Martial Arts? I think it's Voyage Martial Arts. But those guys are awesome over there. Some beast among men at that school. So it's been pretty awesome, man. This thing we call jiu-jitsu has really been nothing short of amazing. From training, the people that I've met, from the conversations I've had off the podcast, man, this community has just been amazing.
Yeah, I love it. For me, it's a medium. Jiu-jitsu is, it's a domain where I can work on so many different parts of myself, my physical self, my psychological self, that it's just a great opportunity for me. And I love it. And you talked about ego earlier. I mean, that's a battle that never ends. So every day I go in and I got to try to get myself in my right mindset and approach things in the right way and put in good, honest effort and try not to get frustrated if I don't get the results I expect. And more, I'm trying to have less expectations and just try to do jujitsu. You know what I mean? And and try to develop my skills and try to help my students. So in some ways, it's easier as a coach because, if you can really think about, I've always done this since I started my academy. Is I always ask myself, what's the best for my students? What's in their best interest? How can I help them? And when you're coming from that place, it's very powerful. It just puts you in the right mindset and then it helps you make the right decisions for your academy and for your students. And then it helps your game as well, too. It helps you make you the best that you can be on the mat as well.
Yeah. And I would have never guessed, being a teacher would help me develop my game so much. Because when I started teaching, I started with kids class. I got offered to teach kids class and I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And, being able to, because I've helped teach, like I'll go in, my instructor was like, hey, we're repping XYZ, and it's like, okay, then, we go from there. But actually, holding a class and having to come up with the curriculum for the kids class, it made me really realize, like, dude, you have to be able to teach this to small minds. So how would you do that? So it had to, I had to break stuff down even into like, micro bites for the kids. But at the same time, it was showing me a lot of stuff about, different simple techniques like triangles and arm bars and stuff that I would never really paid attention to if I have not broke it down so small,
Right.
So everybody that's been, everybody that's been on the show.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that when I started in the academy in 2005, I was very effective at jiu-jitsu. So I could hang with a lot of people and I could pass their guard and so forth. But I really didn't know what I was doing. I couldn't articulate it. My students would say to me, wow, you're so good at guard passing. How do you do it? And I would say, well, first of all, I kind of break their guard and then I kind of get around their legs and then I pin them in side control. Like that's the only way I could articulate it. You know what I mean? So I was doing a lot of complicated things, but I didn't really deliberately know what I was doing. You know what I mean? It was like a lot of instinct. And that's the great thing about teaching is you have to go beyond instinct. You have to lay things down and go step by step. And here's the sequence and here's what you want to do. And here's why you want to do it. So just by being forced to articulate it to your students, you come to know it so much better than you would otherwise. You know it in the front of your brain, not just your instincts. It's not just in your bones. Now you can spell it out to somebody. And that's a whole other level. And I find it's a much better level for a couple of reasons. But one reason is if you're in a competitive situation and you start to feel really winded, really exhausted, if you don't deliberately understand what you're doing, I think your game can deteriorate much faster. If you're only operating the instinct, your instinct when you start getting exhausted is to stop, just don't do anything. Your body's telling you got to lie down and you got to recover now. So, and if you start listening to that message in a competitive situation, then it's over. You're going to lose. But if you deliberately understand what you need to do and why you need to do it, then you can be fairly physically spent, but you can just do the next thing and you can push yourself forward. And in general, in jiu-jitsu, when you're doing the next thing that you need to do, you're gaining a little bit of leverage and you're taking leverage away from your opponent. So if you're exhausted, they're probably a little tired too. So now when you start getting ahead of them, now you can recover a little bit and you're on your way to winning or controlling the other person. But having that deliberate sense of what you need to do is really important in those situations.
Definitely. Having a calm, clear mind,
right.
And a solid game plan. You can't,
Right.
like, in training, yeah, but you just can't go rogue on everything. Just go out there like I'm just wing it and see what happens. But
Right. I've noticed that by watching competition, especially in the last 5 years, is that strategy is very important. So in general, the athletes that have the proper strategy, they have such an advantage. If you're trying to win and you have the wrong strategy, man, you just make things that much harder for yourself, You see it like guys, oh, this guy wants to elevate me and get into my legs. You mentioned Nicky Rod. So he's going to get on his knees. He's going to try to body lock past them, So those are techniques and those are skills, but it's actually a strategy, and then it ends up being a very effective strategy. It puts him in a position where he can win, and that's what strategy does. And I think strategy is important in jiu-jitsu because, there's so many techniques that you can spend time on developing in jiu-jitsu that, you have to narrow them down a little bit, because if you don't narrow them down, then you're never really going to master anything. So if you find a strategy that you think is the best strategy for you, that in and of itself is going to narrow down your techniques, Like when you talk about self-defense, when you look at the early Gracie stuff, I remember they used to have these videos, Gracie in action. I used to get these VHS tapes, and it was just basically the Gracies just literally fighting guys in the dojo, whether guys would come into their academy and say, yeah, we want to fight you, or they would go someplace and fight some other guys, like a karate guy or a kung fu guy or just some street guy. And the strategy was relatively simple. The strategy was keep a healthy distance, come in with a stomp kick and quickly close the distance and get really close to clinch to take down, to mount. And then they start hitting the guy turns over on his belly. Maybe they whack him with a forearm in the back of the head a few times, and then they choke him out. And that's the strategy. And you know what? That's an amazing strategy. That's a super effective strategy. It literally still works in the UFC today, that strategy. And I think that's the true genius of the Gracies. They took a thing like fighting. When I was a kid, you would watch movies and fights in the movies, like there was no beginning, middle, or end. Like people just punching and kicking and hitting each other with chairs. And like, you never know what's going to happen. But they took something as chaotic as street fighting, and they made it a beginning, they made a middle, and they made an end. They brought order to the chaos. And that to me is genius. It's just amazing. And and that's it. They developed what they felt was like, this is the best strategy. And, it still might be the best strategy. I mean, basically Habib was doing that. He was like, he's on the outside moving around, showing some strikes, and then he gets a hold of you, takes you down, and you can't get up
body
again.
lock, and he climbs your body and choke you and finish you.
Yeah, and finish you. And that still works. And I think it's probably, for longevity even, it's probably the best way to be a fighter as well,
Yeah, so, I mean, because if you can, I mean, like you said, like with with Khabib and with the Gracies, they have their being a guard. They'll close that distance. They'll do that front lead teep kick, and once they realize they can touch you with that toe, they're shooting in.
Yeah,
you need wrapped up, take it to the ground, and choke you. Like,
they
definitely still do that. I mean, like you said, it's a system that still works to this day.
It does. And it really is amazing if you stop and think about it, to take and no, I don't think in any other sport there's something as systematic. Any other combat sport is as systematic as that, of like just a total beginning, middle, end. It's really impressive, really impressive.
Yeah. And, then that speaks volumes of that, because we're talking about high level guys, black belts and, black belts and legends of this sport. And they're, replicating the simple stuff, stuff that you learn when you first walk into the door. Like we talk about this all the time, where it's like you have, millions and millions and, of different techniques and whatnot. But you look at high level competitors, arm bars, triangles, the simple stuff that you learn, the day one stuff.
Yeah. I mean, John Jones just did it. He came back and he fought this amazing athlete, this guy, Gagne. He's like such an
Cyril
amazing,
Gahn.
such an amazing striker, great athlete, great footwork. I mean, that guy to me is so impressive. And he's like 260 pounds. He's amazing. And what did John Jones do? Take him down, hold him down, and then choke him out. I mean,
Choked him out.
Pretty effective, man. Like,
yeah,
I don't think he got hit much at all.
Same concept. Yep, he played the distance. He used his length of his legs to keep him out. As soon as he got him into the cage, got him down, choked him out.
Yep, and and John Jones is a very good competitor. Like, he is a genius of fighting. You know what I mean? So he's not going in there in a situation like that to try to show off to anybody. He's like, I want to finish this guy the most efficient way possible. I want to get in here, finish this guy, and get out of here unscathed. You know what I mean? And that's exactly what he did. And why not do that? It just makes sense.
Yeah. You know? And I think if people really wants to see like John Jones work, don't get me wrong, he's done some amazing things in the UFC and whatnot, but watch some of his submission grappling matches.
Oh yeah.
That
give
you
anybody
really see. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But he just did he just rolled with Gordon Ryan, and it was just like, dude.
That was awesome. Yeah.
That was
a lot
awesome
of fun to see that. Yeah.
I was like, man, I would kill to be in that room when that happened.
Yeah, very cool.
Very, 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 very. So, John, we have a staple here at Talk Your Jits podcast, man. We ask everybody this question when that comes on the show. You've been around for a while, so I know you got some names. So, past or present, the top 3 people you would love to get a chance to roll with.
Oh wow, that's a wonderful question. I would love to roll with John Danaher just because, you know, he's such a genius of jiu-jitsu. I know he probably doesn't roll that much. I don't know. I'm thinking, because I know he has different injuries, but I'm an old geezer too. I'm older than him. So if he would roll with me, if he would give me that honor, that to me, that would be, wow. That would just make it for me. And it would be interesting because, you know, I've watched him demonstrate his techniques, and he's demonstrating them with guys who are high-level competitors. And he brings so much pressure that the uke who he's working with is like just groaning. And I'm like, wow. Like he understands the leverage so much that he can apply his body in a way to generate so much force that I would be fascinated to see what that felt like to be on the other side of that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that would be amazing, of course. So that's probably my number one. And then, you know, I've always been a long time fan of Marcelo Garcia just because I just love his spirit. You know, he just loves the art so much, and he seems like he has such a generosity of spirit. You know what I mean? Like such a good natured person, so positive, and such an amazing jiu-jitsu player, and so innovative. It seems like he's invented so much of the game himself that would be amazing to train with him. And then, yeah, of course, Rickson Gracie, who wouldn't want to roll with him? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I mean, so that's probably my 3 and there's plenty more, of course, but
yeah, of course.
But if, you know, going with the young guns today, I would feel like they would just toy with me. So maybe it wouldn't be that interesting, you know, but those 3 I mentioned would toy with me as well, of course, but I don't know. It would be fun. Yeah, that would be amazing for sure.
Definitely, man. Definitely. Well, John, man, if you got some questions for me, man, by all means, fire away. If not, I would love for you to shout out your school. If you got anything that's coming up in the near future, man, you know, the floor is all yours.
Oh, thank you, man. You know what I would love, Lamar, if people checked out my YouTube channel. So my name is John Conners, and my YouTube handle is John Conners MMA. And if they go there, I think I have over 600 videos up there. So I have a lot of shorts that have technique involved, and then I have a podcast of my own. So the name of my podcast is Power of the Tribe, and you can find that on all the podcast places, and you can find it on YouTube. And and then on my YouTube channel, I'm doing some, I call them old man super matches. So I have one that's old man black belt versus giant Marine wrestler, where I did a match with one of my students who wrestled in college in the Marines. 250 pounds, and we had a legitimate 5-minute match, and it was awesome. And he's a specimen. He's deadlifted over 600 pounds and squatted over 600 in competition. So he's the real deal. And then I had a match with a heavyweight, a giant, 6'5" MMA pro, former MMA fighter. And then I had a match with just the new one is against an 18-year-old purple belt. So I know a lot of the old guys are like, how do you handle these young guys? So I had a match with the 18-year-old purple belt, and that one was a submission challenge. So if the challenge was if he could submit me, he'd get $200. So I think I have a lot of videos that people would find entertaining and educational. And I'm trying to be an ambassador of the art. I'm trying to be as positive as I can. I'm on Twitter as well. Old man BJJ black belt on Twitter, and I try to focus only on jiu-jitsu and only positive things. You know what I mean? I try not to fall in the social media trap of weighing in on different things. You know what I mean? I try to stick just to jiu-jitsu, and I try to stay positive. I'm trying to help everybody and help the community. And I view myself as a coach of jiu-jitsu for everybody, whoever wants it. I'm trying to help them, and that's how when we go compete, we compete very hard, but we try to have a lot of dignity and respect for opponents and appreciation for them, so we are always trying to help everybody and, encourage everybody. And that's about it, Lamar. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. And it's funny when you popped up and I saw the old man BJJ, and I said, okay, I've seen that name somewhere. And then you mentioned the video, and I watched that video of you versus the Marine, and I'm looking, I'm like, you're talking, and they're talking about your age and stuff, and I'm like, man, this old man is dangerous. You gained a fan, man. I was admiring your work, and I watched a couple of your videos, man.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So I would definitely recommend it, man. Like, he's in John Conners, old man BJJ black belt on YouTube. I watched a couple. I'm looking at the videos I watched now, and that one was the first one that popped up, Giant Marine Wrestler, and I was like, dude, that's awesome to be being that age and moving like you're 15 years old, man. I love it.
Thank you so much, man.
Not a problem. That's the end of today's episode. I would love to thank John one more time for coming on the show and blessing us with his jiu-jitsu knowledge. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please go and follow our Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube page to stay up to date on all future episodes. This has been Talk Your Jits podcast. Keep rolling, keep grinding, and remember, long live jiu-jitsu. Have a great day.
There you go.
All right.